Hello. You must be here for chapter 11 of Fred, Wizard in Training. And that's convenient because I'm going to read you chapter 11 of Fred, Wizard in Training. In the last chapter, Fred got to the cave with the lizard and he found the lizard's tail and he was trying to escape with it when the lizard awoke from its snooze. And that's where we pick up our story. Chapter 11. Fred waited for what felt like an eternity. Thoughts of his family and of Marvin rushed through his mind. Still he waited, and waited, and waited some more. But the end he was expecting never came, not by fire, nor by teeth, nor by tail. Confused, Fred lowered his arm and opened his eyes. He hadn't been waiting that long at all. The lizard's mouth was wide open, but its head was tilted back on the end of its neck. It was still yawning. I'm so sleepy. That was a full-on morning. Fred wasn't sure if the lizard had seen him or not. He couldn't see how it hadn't, but began tiptoeing quietly backwards anyway, trying to make his escape. "Where do you think you're going with that, young man?" the lizard said. "Ah," thought Fred, "it has seen me." He considered making up some elaborate lie, but in his panic his mind was working too slowly. In the end, he decided to be honest. "Well, actually, I was hoping you'd let me borrow it," he said, nodding at the tail, trying to sound calm. "You don't need it, do you?" The lizard stared at him, curious. "I don't suppose I do," it said, "but that's beside the point. You're trespassing." "Oh, yes, I suppose I am. I'm dreadfully sorry about that," Fred replied, before adding politely, "Do you get many visitors?" The lizard seemed taken aback by the question, which was understandable. Enormous fire-breathing lizards aren't usually asked many questions. "No," the lizard replied. "I rarely see anybody, to be honest. Except for this time of year when you lot arrive in town and cause me lots of bother. Still, it could be worse. Eating your sort gives me a nice change from my usual diet, and you look like you'll taste just as good as the others." Fred couldn't say whether or not he'd be tasty, but didn't want the lizard to find out. He tried to keep the questions going. "Your usual diet?" Fred inquired. "What do you normally eat?" "To tell you the truth, it's pretty barren round here, so whatever I can get my teeth into," said the lizard, his tongue flicking out of his mouth and along his lips. "If it's a bad week, mainly broccoli, turnips, kale, a goat if I'm lucky, and I'm partial to the occasional pigeon." Fred spotted his chance to keep the conversation flowing. "Funny you should mention pigeons," he said, reaching into his backpack. "I've brought something I think you might like." He chucked Pigeons of London, a lonely anorak's guide, toward the lizard's front claws. "It's a real page-turner," Fred said, "although the man who wrote it probably has a few issues." To Fred's despair, the lizard barely looked at the book. Instead, he ate it. "Not much of a reader, then?" Fred asked. "Oh, I like reading. I just prefer eating. And I've already read that book," the lizard explained. "You're right, though. It was most enchanting. I've never been to London. Sounds like an interesting place." Fred was delighted that he hadn't yet been eaten, but could sense the end of the conversation coming. He scrabbled in his backpack for something else with which to distract the lizard. "I tell you what, why don't you take this?" he said, handing over his library card. "That way, if you're ever in London, you can borrow some books you haven't read before." The lizard took the card. Fred felt its fiery gaze burning down upon him. "And you might as well have this too," Fred continued, donating his grand's parking permit. He was desperate to do anything and everything to keep the lizard happy, even if it meant getting into trouble with his gran. He could deal with that later. For now, he had to get his priorities straight. London's great, but finding a parking space is a nightmare. Pleased with how quickly he'd thought on his feet, Fred let a little smile spread across his face, but the lizard was still eyeing him suspiciously, and Fred's stomach rolled over. "You're very generous, aren't you?" the lizard probed. But I'm wondering why. Are you wasting my time? Tell me again why I shouldn't just gobble you up." Fred thought this was a very reasonable question. He paused, considering his response carefully, then replied with the only answer he could think of. "Well, you seem like a very nice lizard," he said. "You've been so kind to me so far, what with letting me in your cave and not eating me or setting me on fire. You know, you lizards get a bad reputation. Monstrous, evil, terrifying, that sort of thing. But I'm sure you're all really kind. Honestly, I wouldn't want to disappoint you, as I'm sure I taste horrid." "Disappoint me?" the lizard asked. "Nonsense, you look delicious and just what I fancy for pud." "Really?" Fred said. "There's not much of me. I guess I'll taste just like the other wizards and witches, except less magical because I'm rubbish at magic, and bonier because, well, I'm bony." The lizard looked Fred up and down. Fred gulped, and then an idea struck him. "Anyway, wouldn't you like to try something different for dessert?" he continued. He hadn't a clue whether his plan would work, but couldn't see any other way out. It had to be worth a try. The lizard sounded interested. "Something different?" he asked. "Yes," said Fred, "something new. Do you like trying new things?" "I'm open to it," the lizard replied. "What are you offering?" "How do you feel about bacon?" Fred inquired. "It's marvellous," replied the lizard, "particularly with avocado, but I've had it 1,000,000 times. It's not new." "Well, what about leeks?" Fred offered. "I do like leeks," the lizard said. "My mother used to fry them in lots of butter, and it always smelled delicious. But they're not new either. You're wasting my time, aren't you?" Fred's stomach flipped with fear. This was proving to be a risky idea. "I wouldn't dream of it," he promised the lizard, trying to steady his voice. "Have you ever had cheese?" "Old," the lizard shouted. "Crisps?" Fred asked desperately. "You must like crisps." "Give me something new or I'm going to gobble you up," the lizard roared. Fred shakily opened his backpack. He searched inside for the only item that just might save the day. He held it out for the lizard to sniff. "I present to you," he said grandly, "bacon, leek and cheese crisps." The lizard leaned its nose into the packet. It slowly inhaled the stale, soggy aroma. Then it stared directly into Fred's eyes. "This," it said slowly, "is new." A grin spread across its face. "And I like it." Fred, as relieved as it is possible to be, tipped the remaining crisps into the lizard's grateful mouth. Eager to seal the deal and get away, he added, "Pleasure doing business with you." "Likewise," the lizard mumbled through its mouthful of crisps. "I'm impressed. You're braver and smarter than you look, young man. In 50 years of trying, no witch or wizard has ever captured my tail. You know what? Keep it. It's worth more to you than to me." "Thank you," Fred smiled, struggling to believe his luck. Then, worried his good fortune could last no longer, he turned round, picked up the tail, and fled as fast as his tired little legs would carry him. That was the end of chapter 11. Surely that's job done. Find out in chapter 12